Bad.
And most of the time, clients choose to leave a specific sum of money to the charity. Now, one caveat to doing that, if you're going to say, well, give $100,000 to the American Cancer Society and everything else to my children, is you have a limited time to have that done after you die.
Right.
It's somewhere between 9 months and 22 months. And it's a technical rule, and I don't know if we need to go into all the technicality here.
We don't.
But you know, you do want to make sure that whoever is going to take over when you die, and you've named that person so they're prepared, that they know, okay, you have a limited time to make this happen, so that they can protect the tax benefits of the retirement plan for the children.
Right. So part of this, what we're talking about, I think, is, and we're going to have another program, by the way, on administration related to these plans, but you do have like basically the September 30th of the year following the death, when you have to get these things sort of divided out, and so that is something that you don't want to leave sitting around, otherwise it's going to have some real negative tax consequences. So anyway, just a little detail, but charities, again, because of the nature that they don't have to pay taxes on this income, they make great beneficiaries for these if you are in a position to do that sort of a thing.
It's absolutely the first place if you're going to make a charitable gift, we want to make it from the IRA. So it's not just a matter of, well, I just write a name down, right? Because if you just write a name down, it's probably not a charity.
Right.
Right? Because you're thinking about your family.
Right.
But when you're thinking about charity, that's the place to make the gift from first.
Okay. All right. Well, how about making a trust as a beneficiary?
Making a trust the beneficiary is actually a really great thing. There's a lot of benefits to having the trust be a beneficiary if it's properly drafted, rather than just naming an individual outright. For example, the IRS in 2001 put out regulations that tell attorneys how to create these, what we call conduit trusts, where the money can pass through the trust to the beneficiary so that the beneficiary can stretch out over their life expectancy the distributions from this retirement plan, right? Remember at the beginning I said, well, your 18-year-old could have access to all of that money all at once. Well, assuming they took $100,000 out, and remember that they have to pay income tax on that, something 18-year-olds may forget, right? This kind of alleviates that problem, because while the 18-year-old may be the beneficiary of the trust, they're not necessarily going to be the trustee of the trust. And so whoever you've named as the trustee determines how much money comes out of that retirement plan. So the 18-year-old doesn't get to decide, I want a new car, I'm going to take the money out of the retirement plan, or I want a new TV, or I want new shoes, or whatever it is. The trustee decides, in coordination with everything else you've done in your planning, to make sure that the money comes out in the most appropriate fashion.
Right.
On top of that, when you set up a trust, we don't look at the contingent beneficiaries, or those what if beneficiaries. So I have a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old daughter. They were adopted from Russia that you mentioned earlier. If I said I want my daughters to get my retirement plan, but if they're dead, I want the money to go to my mom. Well, my mom's in her 70s, right?
Right.
My daughters can stretch out over their lifetimes, right? So a 5-year-old has got another 80 some years to live. So they can stretch out that retirement plan and take a little bit every year over the next 80 years.
Right.
But if I've named my mom as the contingent beneficiary and she's 75, she's only got about 10 years to live. So my daughter would end up having to take the money out over my mom's life expectancy. It's a little quirk in the law that makes no sense, but it's the way the law works. If Natalie is the beneficiary of a trust and the trust is the beneficiary of the retirement plan, then we don't look to see who the contingent beneficiaries are, my mom or somebody else. We only look to see who the actual beneficiary is. and then we can use their life expectancy to distribute out over time.
Okay, so one thing I want to make it clear is this is not a typical revocable trust that we're talking about. Okay, so really it's a single beneficiary for the most part. You can have some contingencies that are built in, which is the great feature that you're talking about, that you can still provide for that, but it means that this person then can get really the trust is disregarded in a sense, and they can get the distributions over their life expectancy, like you said, a small child and so forth.
What the trust does is provide a switch of control from the beneficiary having control to the trustee having control for the benefit of the beneficiary, right, as to when those distributions come out. And it's going to be an irrevocable trust, but this is also when you've died. So, your revocable trust oftentimes becomes irrevocable anyway at that point. We tend to draft these right into your revocable living trust. So it just says, when I die, if any money is coming from the retirement plan, it goes into this trust this way and handled this way.
So what happens, though, is that you're setting up, it's sort of a trust under a trust.
Yes.
Okay, so you're providing for different trusts in one instrument. But again, this isn't a typical revocable trust that people have, and so you need to be very careful about what's being done. And when somebody says, yeah, let's just make the trust the beneficiary, make sure that the trust is the right kind of trust, otherwise your family's going to have a problem if something happens to you.
And that's an excellent point, because these rules were put out in 2001. So, first off, we know that if your trust was created before 2001, it doesn't comply with the IRS rules. So you don't want the trust to be a beneficiary if it doesn't comply with these rules.
Right.
Secondly, it took lawyers a long while to figure out these rules and to start telling their clients about them. So just because your trust was done in 2004 doesn't necessarily mean it complies with those rules. And you probably should make sure. The proper term is conduit trust, and you should talk to your attorney about whether the proper provisions are in there for that. Even today, we still have problems with attorneys not really understanding these rules and just saying, name an individual, not the trust.
Yeah. So anyway, just be aware that unfortunately, not all attorneys are really conversant with this. That's part of the reason why I have Ray with us today. He actually has been teaching some of the attorneys in our area about this, and so he has good information to share with all of us. But be sure to ask again, as we said. There's your key term for a conduit trust, and say if they don't know about it, they better get consult with another attorney who is familiar with it in putting together your estate plan. All right, I guess, why should I integrate my retirement plan beneficiary with my estate planning? I think we've covered some of this, but maybe you have some additional thoughts you want to throw out.
Well, I think that, most of the time what we're trying to do is maximize the benefit to our family, right? And if we need to put restrictions on family because they could hurt themselves, for example, an 18-year-old may not be so responsible with saving money, for example. Having a plan that's not coordinated means that the plan isn't necessarily working to solve the problem that you want. Now, if you have adult children, maybe you're okay. Except, what if you've decided that I'm going to give this account to this child and this account to this child, and then as you get older, you spend money from one account and not the other. When you die, the one who's got the account that has all the money goes to one child, the account that has less goes to the other. That may not have been what you intended, but that can be the result. So coordinating these things becomes very important to make sure that you know how money will be spent while you're alive to take care of you, so that it also benefits people properly when you die.
Okay. We've had some interesting developments that have come up. We've got about 5 minutes left just to give you a ballpark. We've had some developments that came up at the end of last year related to our estate tax laws and so forth. In a sense, we're all still in suspense, I guess we could say. But maybe you could make some comments about that and how it relates to maybe to what we're talking about today.
Well, the good news is where it used to be that 95% of the people who came to see me worried that they might have an estate tax. There might be an estate tax problem. The good news now for most people is they're not even close to having an estate tax. The estate tax exemption is $5 million. Mm-hmm. And so that's $10 million for a married couple that's planning together, right? Mm-hmm. That's a lot of money. Now, there are certainly a lot of people who have that kind of money, but most don't. And that has relieved a lot of the pressure from people as to how they plan, or actually even whether they need to plan. The problem is if you fail to plan, the state of California's got a plan for you, and it gives control to the kids at age 18, and it's not coordinated with other aspects of your planning and mm-hmm. stuff. At the same time, because people don't plan, they also then don't restrict the planning. So like if I die and then my wife goes and marries somebody she meets on the Alaskan cruise while she's grieving me, and I haven't done anything to protect my kids mm-hmm. because I didn't do any planning, so she rolls over my IRA money, she rolls over my 401k money, she gets everything from the house and stuff, and then leaves it all to Harold, mm-hmm. right? And Harold isn't the father of my children, mm-hmm. so he decides when my wife dies, well, I'm going to give it to my kids and not to Raymond's kids. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, planning is still very important, even though we don't really have estate tax issues. There's still a lot of what happens when I die and how do people receive the money in the best way possible so they can be successful.
Right. Now, another issue related to this is, as I said, we are in suspense. So we know we've got these exemptions for 2011 and 2012, and God knows what's going to happen after that. So how do you plan in that sort of a situation? Again, here we got a whole minute, but anyway, throw a little something.
Well, I'm not predicting what Congress will do anymore. Yeah. That hasn't proven to be very easy.
No.
So, what we do is we plan for today, uh-huh. and we watch to see what's going to happen tomorrow, mm-hmm. right? If Congress decides to lower the exemption, that's something they're going to have the political will to do, mm-hmm. something that'll be very difficult, certainly in this congressional environment. And if President Obama decides to run as the I'm going to tax you more president, he's probably not going to get reelected.
He hasn't been inclined to do that so far, has he?
No. So, most people feel fairly comfortable that even if we didn't maintain a $5 million exemption, we're not going to go all the way back down to $1 million.
Yeah.
But you should work with your professional advisors and make sure that your plan stays up to date as things change.
Okay. All right, Ray, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure having you again as a guest.
Thank you.
And folks, I hope that we've got you at least thinking, because retirement plan assets in some ways are invisible assets. People don't think about them very often. Like if you ask somebody to make a list of their assets, typically they won't put down their retirement plans. And so, but this is an extremely important and one of the biggest assets for many of us. And so do give this attention, and I hope that you will see an attorney if you haven't in the recent past, and look at doing some estate planning related to your accounts. With that, we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.